the life cycle of a butterfly in a nail art design. So on like the topmost leaf, I have a really just easy leaf and then 3 little tiny eggs. On the next leaf down, I have a caterpillar. The next one down, there is a chrysalis hanging from it. And then on just the stem of this little twig or branch or stem or whatever, I've got a butterfly. I love this design. It's been one that's been on my list to do for years, and I've just never done it. And I've always thought, oh, I should do it, but then it's the wrong season. So I finally decided to do it during the right season, because thank goodness it is spring. And I hope you guys love it as much as I do. And don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well.
So we're going to begin with an overlay of sky blue acrylic. And so if you don't want it to be sky blue, instead a different shade of green, like a darker green or a lighter green, would also work really well, just to make it look like it's in a whole patch of these little plants. But otherwise, I really love a sky blue background for a nail. Just looks so bright and springy and happy. And then after we have that done, I'm going to encapsulate this nail with a layer of clear acrylic to make sure that it is nice and strong. And it just makes it so that it gives a little bit of a distance between the background color and the foreground art, so that I personally can see like a floaty effect. And I know some people I've heard say that they can see it too, and that they love that kind of floaty effect with the 3D art, and some people say they've never noticed it, but I personally love it. So I love to do a clear encapsulation. After we have it filed, I'm going to apply a layer of gel sealer, cure it, and now I'm going to take a bright green and I'm going to start sculpting out my little branch. So I'm going to try to work this as thin as possible and kind of stretch it down the nail. So as I'm doing that, since there is that layer of gel sealer in the background, the acrylic will move very easily, and you should fairly effortlessly get this nice skinny shape going down your nail. And if you have any trouble with it, my recommendation would be to try to use your acrylic a little bit more wet, because then it'll have a bit more of a liquidy effect and it'll stretch easier. Or possibly you just have an acrylic that doesn't want to work with you very well. So if you can't get it to stretch into that shape, maybe try switching brands up a little bit, or just try using it a little more wet. But after you have that center branch, you're going to want to add 2 little stems for the leaves coming off the sides. And so now on a nail form backing, we're going to be sculpting our leaves with the same shade of green that we just sculpted our branch with. So this is the first one. Don't do them all at once. You want to have a chance to place them before they're all set up. So I like to work on 2 at a time, is kind of what I do with most of these things. So after I have them and they're starting to set up, I'm going to take and add a little center vein going down the middle of the leaf, and then kind of work on a bit of a roughly edge so that the edge isn't perfectly smooth. Because even if a leaf has a smooth edge, a lot of times they have a little imperfection in them here or there that makes the edges look a little bit more uneven or kind of roughly. But then after the leaves turn matte, you're going to want to slide your brush underneath them and gently almost fold them in half, and then place the leaf down on the nail form backing. And the one that's going to have the chrysalis on it, you want the leaf to be a little bit more turned upright so that you can see the underside of the leaf more so than the other 2. So that for that first one, just kind of tip it up a little bit more. As you can see, it was folded a bit more than this next one, which is going to be for where our caterpillar is going to sit. And knowing what is going to be on the leaves kind of helps in your sculpting and your placement too. So we've got that next one. If you have a gloved hand, you can use your fingers to kind of help prop those leaves up as they're finishing curing. If you don't have a glove on, I wouldn't recommend doing that, because you don't want the wet acrylic to be touching your skin. Now we're going to be sculpting our last little leaf. For that one, use slightly less acrylic so it isn't quite as big, because typically as leaves go farther up on their branch, they're going to get smaller and smaller and smaller towards the tip. So since this one is going to be at the tip of that branch, you do want it to be ever so slightly smaller. Not significantly smaller, but just a little bit. And then after that turns matte, you can slide your brush underneath it, pick it up, place it right on the tip of the branch. And that one you want to be almost flat against the nail, because it is going to be where those little butterfly eggs are going to be. So you want them to be easily visible. So you want the leaf turned too much. Same thing if you want to use your finger to prop up that leaf, go ahead, and just to help shape it, there's no problem with that. So now on a piece of paper, we're going to be drawing out the wings of our butterfly. And the reason we're drawing them out instead of just sculpting them is because you want them to be symmetrical, or as close to perfectly symmetrical as you can get them. And since I've got the paper out and I'm making templates, I'm going to go ahead and just make a little drawing for my caterpillar and my chrysalis to follow. Not as necessary as the butterfly wings, but if you're, when in Rome, I suppose. So now I'm going to lay my nail form backing over all of those little drawings, and I'm going to start sculpting my little bits of my butterfly design. So for the actual butterfly, I'm going to go in with some orange acrylic, The great thing with this design in particular is that there are so many varieties of butterflies, and you can do moths in the same type of design too, that you can really change it up. But the one thing to keep in mind is that if you are going to change the type of butterfly or do a moth instead, you're going to want to do some research and find out what their chrysalises look like and what their caterpillars look like, because they won't look the same. And so you want to make sure that what you're doing is, at least I would want to make sure that what I was doing was the right shape and style for everything to make it look like it's part of the same species. So now I've got my half of my butterfly done. I'm going to go through with a darker shade of green than I used for my plant, and I'm going to be sculpting the chrysalis. And the chrysalis looks very, very dark on this nail form backing, but it's actually a little bit brighter than it looks in person. So it's more of like a grass green than a bright, fresh, leafy green like the other green I was using. But as long as it's just a darker color, it's good. You just want it to vary so it doesn't blend in with the leaves. You want it to stand out enough that it's noticeable. And then sculpt the little stem on the top of the chrysalis. Add a little bit of texture on the front of it with the tip of your brush just to give it some shape. More of that can be kind of brought to the surface when you do some painting later. And then for my little caterpillar, I'm going to be sculpting it with white acrylic. So I'm going to set my white acrylic down and then stretch it into the shape of the caterpillar. Kind of take the tip of my brush and sort of work it into the right shape. Keep in mind the shape of your leaf and the length of your leaf so that when you're sculpting all of these pieces, they're going to look like they fit on the nail at the end. You don't want your caterpillar to be twice as big as the leaf that it's on, because that just wouldn't look quite right. So after you have all of these little bits sculpted out and they're all done, you're going to want to make a second set of the butterfly wings. But once all of that is complete, then you can go ahead and start assembling. The one little piece of advice I would have for you is don't rush the setting process, especially for the 2 butterfly wings, because you don't want them to be flexible at all or any bit sticky. So before you start gluing everything together and sculpting the rest of it on the nail, just let these set to the side for maybe 5-10 minutes just to be certain that they are fully done. But now, after we are certain that they're all ready, we're going to start gluing it together. So I'm going to take my caterpillar and I'm going to glue him onto the second leaf. And as you can see, I didn't glue it flat on the leaf. I stood it up on end so he's actually on his little feet. Then I'm going to glue the chrysalis hanging down from the third leaf. And then after I have that done, then we can glue our 2 butterfly wings in place. And so when you're gluing those butterfly wings, same thing kind of like with your caterpillar. You don't want to glue them flat. You want them to be up at a slight angle so that they don't look too floppy. They look nice and 3D in the way that they should look, I guess. So we're going to glue the first one down and then place the second one. Using something like an offset tweezers is going to help this process significantly, because if you just try to use your fingers, at least for me, especially if I'm wearing gloves, I feel like my fingers just are not capable of placing these teeny tiny pieces effectively. They would never end up where I want them to. So then after we have that, we're going to take some black thread and we're going to glue 2 small pieces of black thread to our caterpillar's head. So there's the first one. They did not want to go in place. And there's the second one. And then after you have those 2 glued to your caterpillar, then you can glue 2 to the front or to the head area of where our butterfly's head will be. It's not sculpted yet, but it will be eventually. So glue those 2 pieces of thread down. If they aren't exactly the same length, that's fine. You can always trim them later. I would recommend waiting to trim them until there is some acrylic encapsulating them so that you don't accidentally, when you're trimming them, make them fall off. And now we're going to add another layer of orange acrylic to our butterfly wing that's smooth. So because our wings they were sculpted in the exact same direction, once you take them off and you flip them so that they're each going one in each way, one side is going to be very, very smooth and the other side is going to have a little bit of a rough texture from when you sculpted it. So you want them to match. So instead of trying to make the one side super duper smooth, just add a little bit of texture to the other side and then they will look perfectly symmetrical. I added a tad more acrylic to the back of my chrysalis to round it out, and then with black acrylic, I'm going to start sculpting my butterfly's head and body. And so as you're sculpting this little bit of your butterfly, be very careful because since this is black acrylic, you don't want it to stain your orange acrylic. So try not to get too much acrylic at a time and just do it little tiny bit by little tiny bit so that the black stays fairly contained. And then on your first leaf, you're going to want to sculpt 3 super tiny little circles of white acrylic. So try to pick up the smallest beads of acrylic that you possibly can for those little butterfly eggs. And then we're going to fill in behind our caterpillar with more white acrylic. So just take some white and add some bulk. You want this design to look the way it should look from all angles. So if somebody viewed it from behind, there's that nice rounded back on our chrysalis. If it's viewed from the top, you can see that our caterpillar has a 360 effect. And you just want to keep that in mind throughout the whole sculpting process so that you address any places that might need some fixing. So now on our butterfly, we're going to start painting all of the details. I decided to go with a monarch type butterfly, so I'm going to begin with some black outlines on the wings. And then after I have those outlines done, I'm going to be adding some veining throughout the inside of the wings. And painting a monarch butterfly is one of those things that is done a lot in the nail community. If you've seen all of the butterfly, like I know Cute Polish years and years and years and years and years ago did a butterfly, a monarch wing type design, and it is one of the most recreated designs I think in history. So I think if you are a nail artist in the nail community, it's probably something that you have done. And if you haven't, you should probably do it just once to cross off your bucket list. But it's a very simple, it's one long oval on the upper side of the upper wings and then shorter ovals all the way along the other portion of the wings. And then lots of little white dots in the black area. And then after you have this, you're also going to want to remember that you have to paint the underside of both of these wings, which isn't something that I showed on video because it's a repetition of what we just did. But don't forget to do it because that is something that really sells the 360 effect of the design. With some darker green, I'm going to be adding a little bit of veining on my leaves and then some outlining on my little chrysalis. And then on your caterpillar, you're going to need to add the black and yellow details. So I'm going to start with the black and just add the stripes and the little kind of wrinkly design on him. And then go through, and you're going to need to repeat this on the other side. I accidentally got some black paint on my leaf, so I was going to clean that up. And then add just some yellow highlights throughout. Now apply some matte top coat over everything just to seal in all of that acrylic paint. And then this design is done. Like I said, I've been putting this design off for a very long time because for some reason, it was one of those designs that I couldn't quite wrap my brain around how I wanted it to look in the end. And then all of a sudden I was like, I'm figuring this one out and I love how it looks. It doesn't look choppy or patched together. It looks very effortless and clean. I love it. I hope you guys love it as much as I do, and I'll see you next time. Bye.